To begin, it would be great for students if you can add in the chat your name, your pronouns, your year, and your major. That would be great context and a way for us to get to know you a little bit. We would love for you to get familiar with our panelists as well. But we also want to make sure that you ask all these panelists all the questions that you have as it relates to or curious about careers, business, and management career trajectory. Um, we will kick things off today with the panelist intros. Throughout the event, you are welcome to put your question in the chat. If you want to direct message it to myself, I'm Carrie, I she, her pronouns, I'm an advisor, or my colleague, Mia Smith. She's also helping us with the logistics and the tech side of this event. Feel free to put your question to either of us, all of us, or raise your hand and be bold, and we're happy to call on you so you can verbally ask your question as well. So let's get started with intros. I'm just going to go in a random order, and if Kate, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah. Do you have any specific questions you want me to answer or just a blurb about who I am?
Blurb about who you are would be great.
Okay. Kate Agnew. I use she, her pronouns, class of 2011. Studied math with an environmental studies minor. I did program board for my 3 years there. Well, I was there for 4 years, but I did it for 3 of the years. Absolutely loved it. And I feel like that plus student government were some of the things that most prepared me to navigate the business world. So I started my career at Target in their technology leadership rotational program. Did that for a couple of years before going to business school. So I got my MBA. I went to MIT, so I was in their Sloan School of Business. Then I came back home to Minnesota and was unemployed for 6 months and kind of dabbled around, was a campaign manager for someone running for Minneapolis City Council. Landed eventually at Optum. So I'm at United Health Group, and Optum is the technology organization there. So I'm a senior director of software engineering. I've got a team of about 60 engineers doing some really, really cool stuff with healthcare data.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for being here. Let's pass it over to Nikita.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikita. I use she, her pronouns. I am class of 2019 and graduated with an econ and applied math double major. I joined McKinsey. I interned at McKinsey my junior year and then joined them full time after graduation. And did a bit of a random walk. Got experience in a few different industries such as retail, healthcare, but then really found my passion within insurance, which I know sounds boring, but actually there are some really interesting problems to solve. And more specifically, actually, within the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion and insurance. And so currently I'm on a secondment opportunity with McKinsey at a company called Ellucian. And I am part of the corporate social responsibility team and setting up that strategy for 15 of our global offices around the world, and working with the senior director of CSR and the chief people officer to really kick that strategy off the ground. But yeah, I'm also applying to MBA programs. So if you have questions about management consulting, ed tech, MBA programs, insurance, whatever it is, I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Nikita. Let's pass it over to Livia.
Sure. So my name's Livia, she, her pronouns. I graduated from Mac in 2010, which feels like a really long time ago, with a major in international studies and a minor in political science. Post-graduation, I went to work for a consulting firm called Sustainability, which was focused on developing sustainability strategies for Fortune 500 companies. During my time there, I specialized in what we call supply chain sustainability or responsible sourcing. And that's really how a company views its supply chain for all the materials that they're sourcing, whether it be coffee or clothing or what have you, and ensuring that the environmental and social practices taking place both at the raw material level at the farm and at the factory are in line with legal expectations. So I was at that consulting firm for about 5 years, which is when I started working with Keurig as a client. They were Green Mountain coffee roasters back then. And then I came on board to Keurig, was working with their coffee farmers in Latin America to make sure labor practices were being followed. I did that for about 5 years, going to Latin America once every month. So I did a lot of traveling around that time to coffee farms. And then I went to Campbell Soup to build their responsible sourcing program for all their agricultural supply chains. Did a stint in apparel as well for a Walmart manufacturer, and just recently returned to Keurig, which is now Keurig Dr. Pepper, to lead their responsible sourcing program in manufacturing. So I've been with them for about a year. I have a 10-person team in Asia and then 2 people in Mexico. And the main focus of the work that I do and that I have been doing for the last many years is working with our facilities and our suppliers on their labor practices, and more recently their environmental practices. So here on this panel to say that business and social impact can work hand in hand, and not to discredit working in-house for a business, because there's a lot of impact to be made from an in-house perspective. So looking forward to the panel.
Thank you so much, Livia. And Kwame, rounding out our panel this morning.
Hi everyone, I'm Kwame. Him, his pronouns. I graduated from Mac in 2013, and while I was on Mac, I interned at Goldman Sachs, and I've been working at Goldman Sachs since 2013. I work in a business called the Multi-Asset Solutions team, where we build and manage portfolios for institutional clients. Currently, my main focus from a global perspective is covering clients across the Americas, so North America, South America, as well as Middle East and Africa.
Wonderful. So I love all the diversity and the global nature of our panelists. It's so exciting to have you all here. Students, I welcome you to add your questions in the chat or direct message them while I get us kicked off with our first question. And my first question is, when you think about your liberal arts education, how did that set you up for a career and some of the roles and positions you've had?
I can kick it off. So I work in finance. So a lot of people think about finance as having a finance or an econ major. I factually disagree, and it's true. I remember one of my colleagues was an art history major. So from my perspective, the liberal arts education, at least how that set me up, is it really teaches you the ability to think and think very, very broadly. And that's one thing that I still apply to date. Anytime we recruit people, it's something that you notice that people who have a liberal arts education, once you understand the basics of the job or the role, you have a much more well-rounded individual in that regard. So for me, it's really additive, because in my experience, most jobs are going to train you to do what they want you to do. And it's how do you add the tangential aspects to it to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Kwame 100%. And I think from my perspective, having a liberal arts education has really helped me think in more nuanced terms about some of these issues that businesses are facing in society. So just to give you an example, one of the big issues that we find in factories in China is overtime. And I have a lot of colleagues that come from very technical fields who kind of see that in black and white. But having come from Macalester and better understanding kind of how the need for financial income often drives overtime, and the fact that some workers actually request overtime because they're sending money back to their families. That gives you more of like a nuanced view of how to handle some of these issues versus kind of saying, yes, this works, no, this doesn't work, and trying to find kind of a middle ground solution for both the business and like the society that they're working in.
Great, perfect. I think one of the pieces of the liberal arts education is that convergence of being able to think critically, understand perspectives, and you can learn different components of a job, but it's the mindset and your ability and eagerness to explore something new that can really help you be successful and a value add for an organization. So let's pivot. And when you were all students, what were some of the ideas or thoughts you had in terms of jobs you were thinking of pursuing? And did that impact or relate to where you're currently at in your career?
I'll kick that one off. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And this was like back when Macalester wasn't doing any type of career planning. So I remember I was on the program board and I loved it. I love the program board. And I loved, like, I did event planning, right? So we had like the winter ball, and like I created the winter ball, and I was like, I love like doing these things and like creating events. And so I wanted to go into event planning. I was like, I could go and like do this at the wide scale. And so I had an internship my senior year. I was at Best Buy in their events planning department, and I liked it. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And then I got I randomly got this email from Kate Crawford in the math department about like this target. And I was like, oh, well, I'm working at Best Buy. So like, I'm kind of in retail. Maybe I could apply to this job at Target and then use that as a way to like renegotiate my offer that I want to get from Best Buy. So for me, it was all just like the money play, right? And I ended up like going through this interview process at Target, and it was for the technology leadership rotational program. And I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. And I applied to that April of my senior year. So like didn't really like plan or think about it ahead of time. And it ended up being the best decision to like kickstart my career. So I don't think I thought about it early enough or thought about the ways that all of my experience at Macalester could translate into a career. And even when I was first started, didn't even see the value that, you know, being on student government and learning how to talk to, at the time, like Brian Rosenberg, and being able to work with different people in administration while also talking to students and having different stakeholders and understanding how do you kind of politically navigate things. And then on the program board, I think I managed, I don't know, budget like 100,000 or 150,000, but like budget management is super applicable to your career too. So figuring out, like, just because I didn't have technology experience, I had all these other things that I soon realized weaved into business and to just like employment in general.
I'm happy to add a little bit of perspective as well. For me too, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was all over the place. Like my sophomore year, I interned for a startup and I really enjoyed the pace and, you know, the things I did, but I felt like I wanted to have wider impact. So going into my junior year, there were two things. One, I wanted to make sure the company that I interned with would sponsor me post-graduation. So as an international student, that was really important and was top of my list. And then the second was I wanted to have impact and change the way, you know, businesses did things. And at first it was just impact. I think now I'm more, you know, focused on the social impact and like save the world sort of impact. But in my junior year, I was like, I just want to do really cool things and tell CEOs what to do at their companies. And so management consulting felt like a good fit for everything, especially the bigger companies that would sponsor me, but also give me the exposure to senior leadership and it actually give me the exposure to change the course of business or the way a business operated. And so I kind of focused in on that my junior year and then post-graduation.
Yeah, I go ahead, Kwame.
No, I was going to say mine was a bit different. As an international student, yes, it was, targeting companies that would sponsor, but for someone who interned sophomore year, junior year, and is in the same job, I kind of had a fair idea of what I was interested in doing. I think for me, the most beneficial aspects was the Macalester alumni and faculty and staff, because to be fair, all I knew was I wanted to be in finance and investing, and it's such a vast field. So for me, having the ability to, one, talk to professors and faculty who knew a little bit about the field, and then two, alumni, I spoke to alumni who had been in the industry for 10 years, 15 years, and even people who had just graduated, and even seniors who were recruiting for such jobs. And then that really helped me narrow and say, all right, I want to be in finance and investing. I don't want to do X. I don't want to do Y. These are the aspects that I like. So for me, the alumni network really helped me narrow it down, because when it came to time for applying to internship and jobs, I kind of knew a targeted approach of what I was applying to. So that helped me in that regard.
That's great. That's really great. I think, Kate, when you started talking about event planning, like that's the same thing that I was thinking of because I was involved in my campus. Because a lot of times, what our current activities revolve around, that's like the exposure that we know, but we don't know what we don't know. And so I think, Nikita, when you talked about your strategy as an international student, I think that really resonates because it is a factor to keep in mind as it relates to your long-term career goals and just the intentions that you had when you came to Macalester, what your family and your community back home's sites were. But to round out Kwame's advice, I think we have lots of resources on our website. Mia, if you want to add them in the chat, are resources on our website for how you can access and find alumni and how you can reach out and conduct a conversation with them to learn about their career is so incredibly powerful. Livia, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I feel a little embarrassed because I got my first job via Craigslist. I graduated in 2010, weren't a lot of jobs available, was kind of panicking. And when I was at Macalester, given the international relations focus, I really thought NGOs were kind of my future. Had a really hard time breaking into that field. And I guess what I've learned from now working in business and social impact for so long is that there's a lot of opportunities to make the job that you want once you're in an organization. And I think that applies business or otherwise, 501s, whatever kind of interest you have. Because when I first started working in this field, there wasn't really anything related to sustainability or responsible sourcing from a corporate perspective. And it was really bouncing around different business departments like procurement and legal and marketing, and always kind of having an idea of what I wanted to do, but trying to better understand how I could do that within the structure of an organization. So I guess I would say my advice to folks who are graduating is, even if you can't get that like director of, I don't know, GHG emissions or whatever at an NGO, and you have a very like set focus of what you want to do, I think there's a way to create that pathway for yourself, even if it doesn't look exactly like you thought it would in while you were at Macalester.
I think that was something for me that was like mind blowing too when I first started at Target, is like I didn't know that, like I thought of Target as like retail. So it's like, oh, they must have like a lot of buyers and then a lot of people that do finance and maybe some marketing. But then like I got in there and they always did these like really cool things and it was super accessible to learn what everyone did. But like they have food scientists and people that like create the foods, and then they have photographers and like I think that especially in some of the large organizations, like it doesn't matter what you do, you can find a role to do that thing. And that was something that I never even thought about until I got to volunteer to do taste testing for candy when I was at Target.
I love that. Yeah, because there's so many things that we don't realize, especially once you join an organization, if it's a sizable organization, the ability to learn about other types of opportunities or think about the way that different departments or roles come together to help support whatever project or initiative. It's really insightful. My next question that I'm going to pose for the panel is, what advice would you give to students who are currently like, well, I really want to find a job, but I don't know like what area of business I should do. What should I be putting in the keyword box? What advice would you have for those students to help them navigate different opportunities available?
I think it comes down to kind of what your interest is, like generally. So like, you know, Kwame and Katie and Kita were saying, like, Kwame was really interested in finance, and that means a whole range of things at a certain company, but he knows that finance is his interest, right? And Kate with the technology. And I think for me it was the same thing. Like, I was really interested in labor rights. And so even though I had no idea what a role in labor rights look like in a company, I was kind of able to navigate the various job postings because there were just words that stood out to me, you know, like legal, regulatory, labor rights, like that type of thing. So even if you have no idea what the role in the business looks like, I think everyone kind of has an idea of where their interests are, even if it's very broad. And I think that that's a great first way to start kind of narrowing down what your role in a business setting could look like.
I'm
For me,
also, go ahead, Katie.
Kate, go ahead. Okay, so I'll quickly say, for me, what really helped was talking to alumni and talking to current students as well. So I would just talk to my seniors who were in econ consulting or investment banking, and I was like, hell no, this is not for me, or that sounds terrible. And also just reaching out to random alumni that I found on LinkedIn. Everybody's so willing to talk to you. And I'm also finding that now during my MBA journey, I just look up people who've been to the school and reach out to them and ask questions. And I think you should take advantage of that network and that access that you do have, as you know, being part of the Macalester community.
I think just to build off of that, I currently am also going through the job search process. Like, it never ends. But I've started like a list. And so at the top of the list, and I have it open right now just so I can like consult it. It's like, what am I good at? And so it kind of just references like, how would I describe myself to others? How would I sell myself of like why you want to hire me? And none of it has to do anything with technology, right? It's about connecting with people. It's about pivoting between strategy and in the weeds, and it's about being a leader. But those things are applicable. So think about what value you think you can add to an organization, and then you'll be able to shape that depending on where it is you go. And then once you have those conversations with everyone, right? So network with everyone, but start to keep lists. So I have like a must have, want to have, nice to have. And then the must have, right? It's about the leadership and who I'm working for and what the culture is. And again, like nowhere on this list has anything to do with like the technology that I'm touching, right? Because I can go and do technology wherever. It's about finding the right people, the right culture, and then like what is the company doing? So really looking for a company that's walking the walk is how I like have it on my list, of being really true to the employees that are a part of that organization. And I think sometimes that can be hard to suss out of like, you can go to the list of like the best places to work, but like, is it really that way? And so usually I think talk to someone within a company to really get a feel for what that company is really like before applying to it.
I just want to quickly add to that. When I was a college student, I was terrified of reaching out to people that I had no connections with on LinkedIn. And I thought it was like the most awful thing to have to do, and like no one would answer and it'd just feel terrible. But I have found that any person, at least okay, the majority of people that you reach out to on LinkedIn, even if you have no connection to them, even if they didn't go to Macalester, if you just explain, hey, I'm trying to start my career, I would love to learn more about what your career pathway was. Like, we've all been in this situation, and so many people are just willing to talk you through like what they did and how they got there. So I wouldn't be afraid to like cold message people on LinkedIn that you think have interest in careers as well.
The only thing that I'll add is and I don't know what the latest is at Macalester, but there's a phenomenal amount of student organizations. So for me, I remember I just signed up to anything and everything that I was interested in, and it was like a free info session. Like sometimes they'll bring guest speakers, you'd have, seniors and all that stuff speaking. So if you really don't know where to start, just like, I don't know, Wednesday night, Tuesday night with free pizza, like just go listen to it and, start from there.
Yes, yes, that's amazing. Because, yeah, I mean, McAllister has done lots of grab and go food options to be mindful of COVID. However, there are lots of student organizations, and I really appreciate, Livia, your comment about um, being bold and reaching out to these people because they want to share their path and what they do. And Kate, your style of organization sounds very very conducive and helpful, and keeping track of all those things is so incredibly important when you're trying to find that good fit of where you want to go and what you want to do. um, my next question is along the lines of the next step. So once you find, you have a good conversation with someone, some alumni, people that work in a position, what mistakes have you made in an interview? And and were you surprised about the result after that interview? Or what learning outcome, what did you learn from that experience?
So not my mistake, because I was fortunate to have many alums just scream at me and guide me throughout the process. But I do actively recruit for the firm. It's as simple as it is. Like, don't lie, right? It sounds very blunt, but if you don't know something, just acknowledge you don't know and try your best. Because if I'm interviewing you, I'm not interviewing you because I don't know the answer. I just want to know what you think. So if you're not sure, just say you're not sure and give it your best shot. But don't go very confident and, say something that's not the case. Because if it's a 30-minute interview and let's say, for 29 minutes you did great, but the last minutes you confidently lied and they know it's a lie, it's 99% of the time you might not get the call back. So I'd say when interviewing, don't lie. The other thing is, as as tricky as it sounds, just practice, practice before the interview date. It's very easy to know someone who's prepared or not. My advice to students all the time is, if you apply for a job, you should assume that you're going to be called for an interview and hopefully you're going to get it. So you should start practicing when you apply, not when you get the call for the interview. I'll give you an example. I've received resumes. Let's say today's Friday afternoon. I received a resume and I'm like, let's schedule a call for Tuesday. Good luck trying to prep, in that time frame. So I'd say, one, it sounds silly, but don't lie. And two, just really practice before you get far down the line.
And I think to add to that, I think it's also important to have your own opinion of the direction that you want your role or your work to go in. So one of the biggest realizations I've had in my career is that when I interview, it's okay for me to say, well, I saw that you've been doing this and this. I think this is great. Like, I think we should, if you were to hire me, I would suggest this. And there's so much public information now that it's easy to figure out, like, not figure out, but get more information on the company's strategy, what they're focused on, where they hope to go. And I think being able to verbalize how you see yourself fitting into that strategy and contributing to it, it is really useful. And yeah, I've had great results with that strategy, and I think it's a good one to employ.
One last thing to add is that, oftentimes, to Livia Kwame's point, yes, you should look at the questions online, see how people would answer them, but at the same time, don't limit yourself to what the expected answer is. And as an example, for consulting, you have frameworks that you should be using for cases, right? There's like 4 categories, and people like learn all these different kinds of frameworks to answer questions. But for me, what worked was actually applying the things I learned at Macalester to the questions. So being a little more different. So I remember talking about this philosophy reading I did on time travel. I don't even know why or how it related to the case, but it somehow was relevant. And I started talking about that. So just kind of expand that thinking. Don't be narrow-minded on what you read on the internet or what that structure should be.
I made a mistake. I'll call it a mistake in a recent interview. This interviewer, VP of engineering, I'm not going to get too in the weeds, but we were talking in the weeds about technology. And he asked me a question: what are you using for schema registry? And like, I didn't get the question. I was like, what do you mean, what am I using? We're just using schema registry. Like that's what it's called. But I didn't say that. I was like totally like thrown off by the question of like, oh my God, I should know this. Like what's he getting at? There must be something more complex about this. And so I was just like, oh, I used Kwame's answer. And I was just like, I don't know. I'll have to like look into that. But it was just that the answer was the simplest answer in front of me of we're using schema registry. And so I think sometimes like, don't assume that the interviewer is like the most intelligent person either. Like sometimes they kind of ask like iffy questions too. And sometimes the easiest answer is the easiest answer, but also like say you don't know if you really don't know, but you might actually know. So don't assume that they're so much smarter than you either.
I love that. That's so great. Hearing all of your advice, I think students will definitely be able to take with them as they're pursuing different careers. And so I want to pivot a little bit. So I really like the diversity we have on our panel. All of you have had experiences in such different environments and teams and just location wise. So what would you, is there anything you wish you would have known before pursuing your current job or career?
Yes. There are a lot I wish I had known. Um, Look, I've been in the same firm in the same business for 8.5 years now. And I think if someone asked me what I wish I had known, is, I was very hard on myself, saying by X date I would have done this, by Y date I would like this. Like, honestly, if someone would have told me life is going to happen and everything is going to be flexible and you're going to plan and go with it, I think most likely I wouldn't have listened to them. But I think that still would help, because like at Mac, I knew that I started school in 2009. I'm going to graduate in 2013. Done. Unless anything happens, that's a fact. But honestly, from now till I retire, no, like I don't really know, So I think for me, it's really being flexible with, what you want to do and being open to opportunities. And I always tell people it's, from my perspective, look, I've made mistakes before, and I remember I give this analogy. When I was at Mac, I could figure out, all right, this class maybe I want an A minus, this class I want a B plus, this class I want an A, and this is what's going to happen to my GPA. And I could figure out, maybe I didn't do too well in this homework, yada yada yada. Now when you work, it's like every day you're supposed to give an A, right? Like you can't be like, oh yeah, in June I'm going to sit up. No, that doesn't happen. So for me, it's really like every day you expect it to give you A, knowing that you make mistakes, but you can't just be like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm coasting, tomorrow I'm going to sit up. No, because you really don't know what's going to happen in the business world. So I'd say one, be very flexible and open to opportunities, and know that you make mistakes, but give it your very best.
I'd also say that, not to use the term the real world, but I think patience is kind of a virtue in career planning, because I think when I was a Mac student, in my head, I was like, I was going to graduate. And then the time between me graduating and becoming like UN Secretary General was literally 3 months in my head, you know? And the reality is that careers are marathons and they take a long time to build. And sometimes you're like halfway through a career and you'll realize that's not for you and you want to change completely and you want to go back to school. So I think as Mac students, we graduate kind of putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to have a job that is impactful and important, because you know we're all smart people, right? And we've been in this very smart and caring community, and so I guess my advice would be like, don't get discouraged if your first job out of college is an admin assistant job that you found on Craigslist, which was my experience. And know that it takes time, and as long as you're always kind of working towards what you want in some way or another, it'll work out.
I'm gonna offer maybe counter advice, which I like, because then y'all are getting both sides. But to counter Kwame's comment, I do think that there are times in your career where, yeah, you're leaning in and you're that A player. But then there are other times where you want to give to some other place of your life, right? And so I think of like right now I'm running for city council, and I have a pretty cush job, and I work 40 hours a week. And if sometimes I work 32 hours a week, like I don't think it really matters. And I had one of my mentors in work. She was like, Kate, like you can't always like deliver at the top of your game within everything that you're doing. And then she's like, if you kind of take a seat back, like your seat back might still be a lot of your peers is like A game. And so no one's going to notice if a couple weeks you're working 32 hours, but you're leaning into other areas of your life. And so I would also say that like, it's about finding a balance. And even if you're given like 80% and you're shooting for those B's or those C's, like I don't work at Goldman Sachs, and maybe things are a lot more stricter there, but like the paycheck still comes and the paycheck is still the same amount of money.
I love that. I like the different perspectives, and we can also see like the differences from one organization to another. So thank you all for sharing your viewpoint and your approach and your experience.
Last thing, sorry, Carrie. I just want to make this point because maybe it's important to some and maybe it isn't. But the last thing that I'll say is, you don't have to make a low salary to be impactful. So before this call, Carrie was saying that she had a student ask, like, how do I make six figures? And it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be a stock trader on Wall Street to make six figures. Like there are other career paths that you might find really interesting. And perhaps like that financial piece is also really important to you, and they can be married. And I think that that's something that took me a really long time to realize. Like I only thought, oh, I can do good, but only, if I'm in this like kind of salary band, and that's not true. The world is changing rapidly, and more impactful jobs are being much more valued than they were 10, 15 years ago. So know that even if you're working for like social impact, environmental impact, like your work is really worthwhile, and you shouldn't take less than you think that you deserve just because you're not in a regular business function.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for chiming in.
Talk
I
a little
did.
bit about salary too, not since
Okay.
we're on it. So I think related to like the networking and talk to people, also have conversations with people about what their salaries are. I know it's like taboo and not very many people share it, but I literally just got back from coffee with this woman, and she's technically like, she's at a different company, but she's like a grade below me. And so I was just kind of like, hey, as I'm looking at other companies, what should I kind of be targeting? And like, my mind has been blown this morning that like she's making 2.5 times what I am making right now at like a level as a senior manager, and I'm a senior director. And so I'm just like, oh wow, I need to be a lot more aggressive in my ask. And I think that you're not going to know that unless you have these conversations. And so wherever you're going to go, whether it's 6 figures or not, right? At least try and understand what are your peers making and what type of salary can you command within that field.
Oh,
Definitely. And I will also say, just because you graduated from college doesn't mean that they can pay you peanuts. Like, you should not be working for free. So to Kate's point, I think it's really important to be transparent about salary, talk to people that have already had jobs, figure out kind of what the starting base is, because we all just put ourselves at a disadvantage if we are, you know, accepting the minimum when we should be accepting much more, even if your experience is limited, or, you know, it's, you should still be paid well.
yes, absolutely. Advocating for yourself, doing your research, and asking those uncomfortable questions. And I think the way that Kate worded it was like a really professional way of bringing up and addressing that topic. So, thank you for pivoting in that direction. I have a question. A student direct messaged me. They've always heard that financial companies care about school fame quite a bit. So, can you talk a little bit about, Mac's advantages and disadvantages when compared to some big universities when applying for jobs?
Yep, I can take that since I think that's for me. So I'll say it's not necessarily school fame, but if you take a look at it, or some people call it target companies, all that stuff, is because you have a lot of alumni who have, been through that process and all that stuff. So they actually have recruiting processes and all that tied to the school. So I'll say it makes it relatively challenging. If you're not a target school, but it's not impossible. Here, I think, we have a handful of other Mac alums at Goldman. What One, technology has really, really almost even the playing field, right? And frankly, with unfortunately with the onset of COVID, it's actually leveled it much, much more. Um, Gone are the days where firms will just go to schools to recruit. Now recruiting is done online. Anyone can submit a video and start the recruiting process. So technology has very, very much leveled the playing field. So I'd say getting your foot in the door is not as hard anymore. The second thing is, this is my personal opinion. If you are at a school like Mac, it actually puts you at an advantage if you can interview as well or better than any of the big name schools, because they are they're perceived to have all the resources, the best faculty, and all that stuff. For me, for example, if you talk to people on myself and my team, once we get a book of resumes, it really, like, nobody cares what the name of your school on the resume. It's about you had good grades, you have a good resume. That's why we have the resume, and that's why we're interviewing you. So for me, it really boils down to yeah, some of the big financial firms might have target companies, but the reality is that the playing field is even once your resume gets in. And now getting your resume in is like, gone are the days where you had to call someone to push your resume somewhere, and say, like, gone are those days. There are so many. I think since over the past 2-3 years, when I started at Goldman, there was only one Macalum working at Goldman, and I knew him. Um, Now we have, like, I just got an email 2 weeks ago saying, "Oh, there's this student from Mac who's coming to Goldman." She didn't reach out to me. She didn't reach out to any other alums. Nothing. She just applied blindly, interviewed, and got it. So really, really take advantage of technology. And to Livia's point, you can email and LinkedIn anyone that you want, and people are willing to help.
Great. Thank you, Kwame. I received another question, direct message to me. What's the most important skill for people brand new in their career path besides being flexible? So is it like learning things really, really fast, or what is that trait or that attribute or that skill that you see most helpful?
I'm happy to answer. I think that so when I got into consulting, I was really stressed out. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to learn all these Excel formulas. I only know how to do the sum function on Excel. I'm going to be behind everybody. But actually, the reverse was true. Everything you need to learn, you can do it on the job. Like, seriously, they have, you usually have trainings, you have managers who are willing to help you. Even the skills that you really need to be successful usually you pick up by doing, and so it's really more helpful to just be there on your first day with two things. One is a willingness to learn, so always be open to those experiences, always be willing to put in a little bit extra effort if you're behind. And then the second is a positive attitude. So I remember I was put on a project and I had to build an Excel model, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever. But I was positive through it. I asked my manager for help. I did trainings at McKinsey, and so just always have that willingness to learn and positive attitude.
I think also to what Kate said earlier, just thinking about your career as like a continuous job search as well, and being open to talking to people who are not on your team and being frank about the fact that like you don't understand what they do and could they help you understand, and just being really willing to kind of be like a sponge of information for the resources that you have, because like we were all saying, like careers are so evolving, and I think Kate's point's a correct one. Like you start applying for jobs when you graduate from college and you don't stop until you retire in a certain way. So it's always good to have that mindset and always be looking to learn more about what's out there and what type of work is interesting to you.
Yeah, I really like the positivity, being open to learning new things and realizing that this is, a journey. And I think the number I saw as it relates to hours worked in a career, it's 80,000 hours is the typical number of hours someone works in their career. And I think when we consider that number, it's really easy to think, oh, all of the opportunities, or oh, wow, like I don't want to be doing the same thing that all of that time. So I love the curiosity, being that sponge, taking in as much information as you can. And a part of that is just being vulnerable, and being open and transparent and communicative. Um, just we have like about 7 minutes left. I want to round out the last question, but if if you feel comfortable, please feel free to put your name and any contact information you feel comfortable sharing with students. Don't feel pressure, but if you do feel comfortable, please add that in the chat for our those in attendance. Students, we're also going to put in the chat an evaluation link. So if you wouldn't mind completing that evaluation, we would love to hear your perspective. And the question that I'm going to end on is a question that I love being asked when I'm interviewed in an interview setting, and that's, what questions do you wish we would have asked you that you want this space to address? So is there anything else that you've wanted to share with students that you haven't had the chance to enlighten us about?
I'll start. When I'm interviewing people, and this, I'm going to refer or kind of relate it to the work that I do within engineering, but I think it's pretty applicable across the board. I don't hire, especially for my entry level engineers, because of the things that they already know. I'm hiring them because I think that they have an aptitude, an ability to learn, a bit of ambitiousness, the soft skills, kind of, they're that package. I do a lot of work with Kafka. No one knows what Kafka is. No school is teaching people Kafka. But like, they come on my team, and if they're a quick learner, I will teach them Kafka, and they will be amazing, and they'll be really good at it because they don't have any like mistakes kind of ingrained in them. They're like, I get to teach them how I want them to do it. And so I think like the point of advice is, don't feel like the jobs that you're applying to, you need to know how to do that job on day one. They will train you, they will teach you how to do it. They are hiring you for what you are capable of.
I love that, Kate. Go ahead, Kwame.
Make time for yourself. Like I mean, I really, really have a good relationship with my colleagues, but I also have friends, right? Like I always tell people I see my colleagues Monday to Friday. Now if I want to have brunch with a colleague, sure, I'll have brunch with you on Saturday. But what about all my friends that I haven't seen Monday to Friday? I only have 2 days for that. So really, really make time for yourself. In some industries and some career paths, it'll be hard, but to what Kate and Livia and Nikita mentioned, really think about how best to put yourself first and let things navigate around that. I'm not saying don't go and try and run the company day one, but make sure that it's a balance. Some people say work-life balance, whatever term you want to use, but it's important. At the end of the day, jobs will come and go, careers will come and go, but at the end of the day, it's also don't forget about your friends and family.
The last thing I would say is just advocate for yourself. Just because you're graduating doesn't mean, I know someone else mentioned it, but ask for what you're worth. Don't work the 80 hours if you have other things. Like I am really good about work-life balance and making sure I protect my time. So always ask, advocate for yourself, because no one else will.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this before, but I think my final piece of advice is be open to careers that are not traditional, or that you didn't think were going to be interesting to you. I never thought I would work at a business, and I love it, and I love what I do, and that's kind of my career from now on. And then I will also just say that even if you change your mind at like 35, like my husband just decided to go back to law school, and I couldn't believe it, but it happens, and he's super happy. And so just because you start in one field doesn't mean that you have to live the rest of your life in that if you don't like it, and just be, kind to yourself and do what feels good to do. The worst thing that you can do is spend those 80,000 whatever hours doing something that you hate at a place that is just awful. So if you need to quit, find your way, and it's not linear.
Oh, I love this. I love this. Kwame, Livia, Nikita, Kate, thank you all so much. Students, feel free to use the reaction clapping emoji. Thank you so much for all of your insights, all of your perspectives, all of your experiences. We really appreciated you sharing them with us.